Hey guys, so back in 2017 I decided to take a break from YouTube just to sort of focus in on myself, work on my career, spend time with family and friends, just to sort of get my life on track before deciding whether or not I was going to come back and start making videos again. Now in 2018 that choice was sort of taken away from me when we started hearing noises, something running up and down the stairs, banging on doors, just generally being a nuisance and trying to keep us awake. And this got to such a point that we really weren't able to rest. Like, we were losing a lot of sleep to it, whether it through anticipation or the actual banging on the door waking us up. Like, it was getting silly. So we decided to sit down and do a cleansing, a full smudging, crystals, salt, the lot. Like, really just threw everything at it to push any spirits present out of the house. And that seemed to work. It really worked amazingly. And like, while I struggled at first with the quiet because I was so used to having a lot of activity around, it was for the best and it really was peaceful. But then June 2019 started, and almost to the day that it started in 2018, the activity on the stairs kicked off, up and down the stairs, banging on doors, being a bloody nuisance. And it really, this time round, I didn't see the point in sitting down to an EVP session. I tried that the year before and I got nothing but scratching sound. So I wanted to do something a little bit more in the moment. So I pulled out the PSB7 Spirit Box and I did a little session with that. And the first couple weren't so great. I sat down, I did a meditation, really opened myself up and tried again. And I got introduced to a spirit called Adam. Now, Adam would go on to be a bit of a lifeline for me because in 2019, I really started to struggle with my mental health. And it's not something new to me. I've had issues with it in the past, but it came on so strong that having these sessions with Adam acted almost as a lifeline. Like, it was something innately positive in nature. It gave me something to focus on that wasn't just, my own negative thoughts and just feeling down and feeling sorry for myself. It was something positive that I could focus on, and I felt like I had a purpose. I really felt like I was helping Adam by getting his story from him that I could pass on and share, and any messages that he could tell me, I could eventually take them away and help pass those messages on. But as my mental health declined, so then did the sort of frequency of the sessions. Like, I wasn't able to pull myself to do them quite as much. And then eventually I sat down to have another session and I was told that Adam had gone completely, just wasn't around anymore. And that hit me so hard, surprisingly so, I think, because I've had spirits come in and out in the past. That's just the nature of the beast. It's not like a direct line to anybody that you want to talk to. Like, you can open yourself up and you can ask them to come forward, but it's not a surefire thing. So spirits come and go. But I've never had one hit me quite so hard, and I think it is just because I was in such such a vulnerable mental state at the time, and I'd put so much into this. Like, it was holding so much weight beyond just the communication. Like I say, it was a coping mechanism. It was something for me to focus on that was sort of taken away from me. Now, there were other spirits present that were communicating from time to time, but I'd felt such a connection to Adam that when he left, he basically just took what enthusiasm I had for the paranormal with him. I was struggling anyway with, just being interested in stuff that I was normally interested in. So having this that sparked enough of that taken away, it just took the rest with it. I just lost interest completely. I didn't bother communicating anymore. I didn't do any more spirit box sessions. I set up the camera for a little bit, but even that, that fizzled out. And then 2019 rolled on. 2020 started, and well, 2020 wasn't the best year anyway. But then 2020 June time started to creep up, and that anxiety started to build up again. Like, this pattern that I'd noticed, like middle of the year, June, July time, where things would sort of ramp up suddenly. It was quiet in May 2020. It was quiet in June. So, that anxiety was building. I was anticipating something kicking off. So I started setting the cameras up again. And right on cue, beginning of July, the activity started again. Unlike previous years, I didn't jump straight in to try and communicate with them because, frankly, the way I was feeling, I just didn't care for the reasons. I didn't want to know. I didn't care why they wanted to do it. I just wanted it to stop. So instead of pulling the EVP recorder out or the PSB-7, I just pulled out the sage, the salt, and cleansed the house because, well, since 2018, I've been sort of trying to keep on top of the saging and the smudging of the house to keep that negativity at bay. And, like, let's be honest, the activity on the stairs was negative in nature. I realised that. I realised that at the time. But there's a part of me that still wants to hold out a little bit of faith in the spirits doing it, that maybe they are struggling. Maybe there is something that they need that maybe I can help with. Maybe it is an attention thing because they want you to know that they're there. You know, I always do try to give them the benefit of the doubt as safely as possible, don't get me wrong. Like, I would never intentionally open myself up to anything innately negative, but if there is an answer there, generally speaking, I would like to help and find out what it is. But as I say, I think I was in such a place during this time that when it started, I didn't care for their reasons. I just didn't. Cleansing the house was just the only thing I could think to do that would help me at the time. And, you know, I mean, it did seem to help a little bit. Like, the activity definitely went down, but it didn't stop completely. Now, 2020 was just a rough year all around. After the thing with Adam and sort of putting the paranormal to one side, I was in desperate need of something to fill that void, something to give me the same gratification that the paranormal used to give me. And as I mentioned on the last one, I'm a bit of a serial hobbyist anyway. The way my brain works is I need something that's going to become a hobby has to give me some level of instant gratification. I need to see achievements. I need to be constantly progressing in at a reasonable pace for me to be interested in. And it's good in that it really does allow me to focus on stuff, but it's negative in that I never necessarily master anything. Usually hobbies don't stick around long enough for me to master them. I just get good enough to feel good about what I've achieved, but then that's it moves on. And the thing about the paranormal was that it was impossible to sort of get good at it. You know what I mean? Like, you'd have a theory and you'd want to test that theory. You'd want to do some sort of experiment, and even something as simple as like a spirit box session where you're sitting and you're trying to communicate, and then a voice comes through, clear as day, answering your question. It's just like that hits. It's just everything that my brain needs, but it's never ending. You know what I mean? There's always a new experiment to do. There's always a new communication to try. And so I needed something like that. And I was sort of just cycling through hobbies. And I think because my mind was in just such a way that things just weren't sticking, things that sparked that interest and really had me like, oh yes, I'm going to buy everything. I'm going to learn how to do this. Within a week, it was gone. Sometimes days. Like, it just nothing was gripping me. I just wasn't interested in anything enough to sort of sink my teeth into it. And this is going to sound ridiculous, but I'd have never believed in a million years that at 30 years old, the hobby that was going to sort of capture my attention was going to be skateboarding. And this is not going to be a skateboarding video by any means, but I do think it's important because it is very much something that encapsulates me as a person over the next couple of years. Like, nothing has drawn me in quite so much as this has, other than the paranormal. And the parallels are quite obvious, really, when you look at them. As I was saying about investigating in the paranormal, there's always a new thing to test. You know, you test a new device, I don't know, the REM pod, for example, and you get some activity with it. It's like, oh, amazing, I can't believe that I've caught that. It doesn't end there. It's not like, oh, cool, I can get activity with the REM pod now. No. Then you bring in the Connect and the K2 meter, and you see if you can get them to interact with both. Like, if I caught that would be amazing. And then you catch that and it's like, oh, well, is that it? No, absolutely not. There's new equipment that you can do. There's a new version of the REM pod. There's this, there's that. It's endless. And in that same way, skateboarding it just hit something, like something just sparked in my mind that it was so perfect. I'd done a little bit of it when I was a kid. I basically learned to ollie up a curb and I was happy. But now as a sort of an adult with better attention span and focus and drive, I was able to take that and say, right, I've learned that trick, that opens up 10 more, and then I learned that one, that opens up 10 more. Like, so it becomes an endless source of, you know, gratification, of like dopamine and euphoria. You land a trick and you roll away. There is nothing quite like that. Nothing quite like it when you've spent weeks practicing it and then you finally do. And as I say, it'd be very easy to say, oh, right, cool, I can do that. But the thing is, there's always something new to learn. And so, yeah, that just took over me in 2020. Except it was 2020, and I think it was like March, April time. The world just shut down, didn't it? Like, COVID happened and the world just stopped. You were no longer allowed out. You were no longer allowed to go exercise in public places. You weren't allowed to see people. You know, and there's this horrible disease that nobody knew anything about at the time. Just sort of, just spreading across the globe, and like nobody knew what was going on. Places of work were shutting down. You know, people were losing loved ones. Like it was just an absolutely awful year all around and for everyone. And I'm under no illusions, don't get me wrong. While it was tough, I am by far one of the lucky few in that scenario, because I'd recently switched over to the lab, and so we were classed as key workers. We were testing animal feed for nutritional content, so animals got to be fed. That affects, you know, the food industry, meat industry, stuff like that. Like it's all connected. So we kept working, and we were quite fortunate in that. The only thing that really happened that was like inconvenient was we kind of got put onto silly shift patterns just to avoid the, you know, human contact as much as possible, like help social distancing and stuff like that. You know, and that it was crap, don't be wrong. Like it certainly cost me a good amount of sleep, but sort of like in the grand scheme of things, it was nothing. I mean, in comparison to some of the stuff that was going on at home, it really wasn't that bad. As 2021 rolled in, I noticed that where usually the activity would go sort of up and down, like you'd have quiet periods and high periods, it was staying so constant all of the time. And I'm not saying constantly hyperactive or anything like that, but it was constant. And we're talking 2 or 3 times a week without fail, you'd hear either a lot of noise or come down and find something out of place, something on the floor or whatever. But the issue was during this time, because of the way I was feeling and my sort of interest levels waning fast, I just wasn't setting up many cameras, to be honest. Like, it would be occasional at best. Like, I'd put up one, maybe two, if there were a couple of places that were being particularly active at the time. But that was about it. I just kept them rolling more out of habit than it was actual interest in knowing what was going on. The activity throughout 2021 was slowly rising. Now, it still wasn't crazy, but it was noticeably higher than it was at the beginning. And I was still cleansing, I was still doing everything I could to keep that negativity down as much as possible. But it just seemed that as the year went on, those cleansings made a less and less noticeable difference. My attempts at sitting down and just telling them to leave were falling on deaf ears. Like, it just didn't seem to make a difference. Like, they were going to carry on regardless of what I did. So as the year went on and restrictions finally started to lift a little bit with COVID, we were able to get out of the house a bit more. We were able to actually stay away, and so that's what we did. And it wasn't just about, you know, the paranormal activity or anything like that. It was generally like COVID had gone on for better part of 2 years at this point. You know, you'd been in lockdown and the lockdown had stopped. You could see friends, you couldn't see friends. Like the restrictions were just dancing around all of the time that it was such a headache that it was finally allowed to just be somewhere else for a change, you know? And so yeah, that's what we did. We started to spend a couple of nights away here and there, just Airbnb in the Dales or, you know, round at a friend's house for a little while. And you know, it was lovely to just get away. But I remember one occasion, sort of like mid 2021, when we were at a friend's house and we'd been there for a couple of days, and I just had this really uneasy feeling creeping up on me, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it because I mean everyone was having a nice time, like they were very welcoming, like there was nothing innately wrong with the situation, but I just had this uneasy feeling, and out of the corner of my eye I could have sworn that I'd seen something out of place. Now I didn't draw attention to it, I didn't want to alarm anybody, but I could have sworn that that was not where it had been left. And so it's like I say, instead of saying anything, drawing any attention to it, I just sort of kept an eye on it. And 2 days later, without shadow of a doubt, there was a coffee mug that was on the corner of this table on a coaster, had been shifted off of it. And I know for a fact that nobody touched it. So at that point, I was just like, you know what? Like, this isn't the first time this has happened. Back at uni, I used to have this where I'd stay at a friend's house and I would notice things at the corners of my eye, whether it was a shadow moving or something out of place or whatever. And I just wasn't willing to do that again. Like, I'm not going to bring that into somebody else's life. Like, they were nice enough to sort of put us up for a while. That's the last thing. I just don't want to bring that drama to them. So we went home and just cracked on as normal. Now, by the end of 2021, my mental health was like an all-time low. It's been so long since I've ever felt this down, and it didn't seem to matter what I was doing to help it. Like, I was finally able to get out and exercise properly and, go skateboarding and to indulge in all these things that made me feel good, but I just couldn't seem to pull myself out of that funk. And I'm convinced that this is the reason that the smudgings hadn't been working for the last year or so, because as I said before, I think the type of cleansing, the type of ritual that you do is almost secondary to the strength of will and the intention that you can put behind it. Because I was feeling so low, when I was doing these cleansings and I was telling them to leave, like, I was lacking that willpower, that actual strength from inside to really commit to them fully. It's like I was going through the motion, but not necessarily feeling it, if that makes sense. And so I decided in 22 that I was going to find somebody that could do that for me, somebody who could sort of communicate with the spirits on a level that I just couldn't. Because yeah, I can pull out the spirit box and I can talk to them and I can tell them to leave and do whatever, but I can't connect with them in the same way that a medium can. Now, the issue with finding a medium, and this is just sort of my thought process at the time, is, well, there's a couple of things. One, I'm relatively skeptical about, psychics and mediums anyway. Not because I think they're all charlatans or anything like that. There is a lot of controversy behind them, don't get me wrong. But it's because you can't know for sure if someone's reading you, essentially, like being able to pick up on cues, even if it's subconscious to them, like maybe they don't even realize they're doing it. But it is possible. Like, there are magicians out there that can replicate that and can convince you that they're psychic, even though they've told you at the very beginning that they're not. I mean, I think Darren Brown did a really good show on it years and years ago, where he went toe to toe with an actual psychic and was able to pull off everything that he'd done. And it's fascinating, but it makes this kind of negotiating territory quite difficult, because I've got to be sure then, before inviting someone round, that I can trust that they are doing what they say they're doing. On top of that, you have the whole privacy thing, and I know this has caused dramas in the comments before, but at the end of the day, this is my home, this is where I live. I have family and friends nearby. Like, I need to keep that stuff private, because there are a lot of crazy people on the internet, and I don't need that address getting out and people showing up at my door. Like, that's a scary concept. Even if 90% of them are nice, like, they're just not always, are they? So I needed to be 100% certain that I could trust the medium that I found to come round and to keep that to themselves, so that we could leave it there and be happy that everything had been sorted and there's no repercussions to worry about. So I sort of set about trying to do that, and the only thing I could do really was to go in with a sort of a checklist almost of things that I wanted them to come out with, because they could, and a couple did, mention Daniel and Anna. Like, that's fine. Like, that's interesting. They are a big part of my life, but they're not everything. They are online for people to find that out. So that to me wouldn't prove that you've picked that up off something. Again, talking about my dad, one medium did sort of go into detail about my dad, and some of it was quite impressive. But again, there is a video online where I talk about my dad's passing and stuff, and sort of how I felt about it, the song that I wrote for him and stuff, all things that came up in the session. But again, they may well have honestly got that information from some psychic means, but I can't verify it because I know it's out there to see. So there were a few early 22 that I saw that they were good. Like, they hit some nails on the head, but it just didn't quite land enough for me to vibe with them on that level. So it was ongoing search, really. But then before I found the one that really sort of struck a chord with me, we decided to have a bit of a get together at the house. And it was just sort of like a pre-drinks, a few snacks, and we were going to go out. I can't remember what the occasion was, but the idea was a couple of pre-drinks here, we'll go out, we'll have a few drinks, then we'll just all go home from there. All good. And the house had been relatively quiet, so when it was suggested that we use our house, I was like, yeah, cool, that's not a problem. But as the night went on, I sort of started to feel that uneasiness that I described before, like when I was at my friend's house. And it was just sort of creeping on me, and I was like, I don't like it. I don't like it. So I tried to wrap things up as quick as possible so that we could just sort of get the night underway just elsewhere. And we all headed out, jumped in taxi to head off wherever. And I quickly nipped back in, and I just set up a couple of cameras just on the off chance that this feeling that I was having was right. And we caught this. Now, when we got home and found glass all over the floor, I was just at the end of my tether. Like, I was so fed up. Now, I'm normally very quiet. I don't raise my voice for anything, but coming home and finding that, like, at the top of my lungs, I told them to stop. I was sick of all of it. I was so fed up. Like, stuff had been broken in the past, but there were like three glasses that had just been shattered, and we were picking it up from under the table, under the TV cabinet. It got everywhere. I mean, I was literally picking bits of glass out of the fireplace because we've got like thermal chip-ins that it had all ended up mixed in with. And I just lost my temper, and I was so fed up of it. Like, I'd been filming less and less anyway, so I just put the cameras away. Like, I was done with that. I'm done filming now. I'm not doing anything with it anyway, so let's just put it aside. And I just doubled down on my attempts to find a medium to come in and sort of cleanse the house, because I couldn't do it. It wasn't working for me, and I needed somebody to do that. Eventually, I got recommended a medium from a friend, and we got speaking and arranged to go see them. And honestly, their whole vibe impressed me, but more than anything, they convinced me. They checked all the boxes, because as soon as I went in, they picked up on the negativity that was around me. Now, yes, I've been through some stuff. Maybe I wasn't hiding it on my face all that well. Like, I was trying to be normal and carry on as if nothing had happened. But you know, sometimes you do wear your feelings on your facial expressions, whether you mean to or not. But it didn't feel like they were picking up on my negativity, but the negativity around me. That was my interpretation of it. They did speak about Daniel. They spoke about my dad. They knew quite a lot about that. Some stuff that wasn't even in my misinterpreted, can't remember what I called that video now, the misread premonition or something like that. That video where I talked about my dad and the song that I wrote for him and stuff that wasn't even in there that they brought up. But the thing that really clinched it, the thing that like convinced me most that I could trust this person, was that they spoke about Adam by name, not just a spirit that I talked to by name. They mentioned Adam, and that the conversation was deep and that they'd left abruptly. They knew that, and I just couldn't understand how they possibly could, because only me and Shauna knew of that connection, of that actual communicational relationship that I had. Only me and Shauna knew. Outside of these four walls, it had never been shared on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, anywhere on social media. It had never been posted. Like, those videos are on a hard drive, and that's it. That's the only place they exist. Now, I've never met this human before, but for them to come out with Adam's name and to actually talk about the nature of that relationship, just it blew me away. And I just felt from that moment on that I could kind of trust them, and that they actually knew what they were doing. So we got talking, and we moved away from the whole reading thing and trying to convince me that they were psychic. There was none of that. We were just talking about my experiences, some of the things that had been going on, and they agreed to come and have a look. Now, they couldn't promise that any cleansing that they would do would necessarily free me of it, but they were willing to take a look, see if they could communicate with whatever spirit was present and get a little bit more than I could with my devices, you know. So we arranged it. They came round and they said as soon as they got up to the house, they could feel it. This air of negativity about it. And they said, because I was careful to question it, it's not a negative entity. It wasn't that. It wasn't like something demonic or anything like that. It was just a negative spirit, like a human person that just was not very nice. They said that they'd been around for a couple of years, which made a lot of sense, really. I mean, when you go back through the videos now, it seems obvious, but in the moment, like, obviously this is over the space of 2 or 3 years for me. Like, it's not all compressed into one cohesive video like these are. Like, it was so spaced out. So at the time, I didn't necessarily notice the negativity, but you just look back at that first spirit box session and the way that the spirits were just being held back by something. It was obvious that there was a negativity there, like a negativity that I tried to cleanse out. Any positive spirits still present? Would you like to come forward and speak to me? Okay, you've made your intentions very clear. Now, even during the second spirit box session where I was told that Adam had been kept outside, it makes way more sense now, looking back, once all this timeline has been compressed, to say that that was definitely the negative spirit that was doing that. Even on episode 2, there was a clip of the stairs where the activity had started again. You could just about start to hear them, and then the camera went out of focus. There was actually a shadow apparition there. It was like a misty form that appeared just for a split second at the bottom of the stairs. That it's just there, and I didn't mention it at the time because I knew like where all this concluded, and I wanted to just sort of demonstrate that it has been there the whole time. And while I didn't necessarily notice it, because for me it's been 2 or 3 years, when you compress it down into that 2-hour slot, it's so much more obvious, you know. And I sort of spoke to the medium when they were there, and I asked what was the point of that negativity. I don't understand why they're doing it. And the best that they could get is that they enjoyed it. Frankly, they enjoyed the chaos of it. They liked that little bit of fear that they got out of you. They liked being a nuisance. And it's 100% my belief that if you are that kind of person in life, because there are people that just thrive on chaos in life, then that's the kind of person you would be as a spirit. Now, I understand that the whole idea of just being chaotic and troublesome and generating fear, it seems demonic, but I honestly don't believe it was. I just think it was a terrible human spirit that was just out to cause more trouble. And so they cleansed the house, they cleansed us, and it was amazing. That uneasiness that I'd felt brewing up, I felt it literally wash away. Like being in a shower, feeling the water just running off you. It was that physical, like I could feel it just draining away. And it was phenomenal. Now, speaking to them afterwards, they are in agreement with me that they don't think it would ever stop 100%. They could take the negativity away and they could come round and they could do it every so often to keep things right, but they can't stop it, because whatever sensitivity I have, which I've described as being quite empathic, they agree, that is the reason that they keep coming in, is because I can feel that, like I'm open to it inadvertently. And now, unless I find a way to completely close myself off to that side of me, I don't think there's anything I can do to completely stop it. Now, that said, it has reset. Like, it is down, low level, maybe some noises, maybe a little twitch of things here and there, nothing crazy noticeable. Like, it has been quiet since, and that is amazing. And it kind of leaves me in a place now where I have choices. Really, I can leave it at where it is. Like, I know full well it's never going to stop. I have done some filming, I have caught some bits, but how far I want to push it as far as encouraging too much to happen is the big question, really. Because yes, I've had this negative spirit and I am in a much better place mentally. Kind of the whole point of the medium coming around and cleansing was to get the house reset, as it were, so that I could focus on myself without anything else going on. And so that's exactly what I've done. I've spent the last couple of years just bettering myself mentally so that I could be better, and I could come back and I could share this with you now in a much better positive headspace, and to just explain myself more thoroughly and more clearly how I'm feeling and how I felt at the time. And so yeah, this kind of leaves us at a bit of a sort of a reset zone, really. I've caught some stuff and I do want to continue in the new year, and I want to, keep filming, and I want to do some experiments, but I am going to be very careful as to how far I push things and how much I open myself up to stuff, because before I was in a much better place and I was able to keep on top of that. And I think I always worry about, if I start to feel less like myself, that is actually just sort of encouraging trouble later down the line. Like, if I'm not feeling myself and I'm not able to put that intention behind my smudgings and my cleansings, then I could be opening myself up to this kind of negative attachment again. So, as I say, I'm going to be very careful. I'm going to be extremely careful going forward. So I just wanted to, again, catch you guys up through this series to have you understand this. As I go forward, you'll see why I'm being more careful than perhaps I normally would have done. Like, I was always careful, but you know what I mean? I'm a little bit less gun-ho now. Like, I'm much more conscious of myself and the way I'm feeling and how that is going to affect any future investigations. So, that said, that's pretty much the end of this series, guys. So thank you all so much for watching. And as always, I'll post any and all activity as and when I get it.